Good morning. I will now convene this regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. Welcome to everyone here in Harris Hall this morning and to anyone who may be watching online. We have a few items before public comment today. First, we'll check to see if there are any adjustments to the agenda from our administrator.
No.
None. Any emergency business?
No.
From the board? Seeing none, we will move right into our first item then, which is employee recognition. And I know this is something we all really enjoy doing, and this is a particularly timely one. So I'll turn it over to our administrator to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Good morning. I want to invite, let's see, is Lauren here and is Dina here? Oh, come on up. Who's got their coats on and their scarves on? It's
got her election nerd T-shirt covered, so you
morning,
can't tell.
but we're gonna power through. We're really pleased today to be able to recognize our full staff in elections. I think we're missing two folks. Is that right?
Yes.
Two folks aren't here with us today, but it is E plus 35.
Correct.
So we'll have an elections update for you later to kind of wrap up the election cycle. But we wanted to be here with you today to recognize our election staff. So maybe if folks would just raise their hand. Rebecca Baker, Julia Barth, Tasha Brown, Dina Dawson, right next to me, Carrie Fountain, and Elise Sindler-Hodges. And we're missing Ryan Lee and Pamela Nevin. We're not able to be with us today, but this is our elections team, and we wanted to recognize this small but mighty group. They all have done a tremendous job conducting the 2024 general election with impressive commitment to transparency, accountability, and customer service. I know the board has seen, because of the updates that Dina provides and when she's here to give these updates, the incredible work that has been done over the last few cycles, particularly this year when we were expecting a record turnout, a lot of energy, and a lot of challenges presented from all of that in this general election. A few by the numbers examples of just how busy the elections team was. We had a 77% turnout in this general election. 213,085 ballots were cast. 4,075 ballots returned to the customer service counter at our elections office. 162,792 collected from official Dropbox sites. 2,594 letters sent to voters with missing or non-matching signatures. 761 of those were then what we call cured by those voters. So their vote was able to be counted because they verified their signature. They came in and went through the process to verify their signature. On the Monday before Election Day, the elections office received 651 phone calls in one day and helped 400 voters at the counter. On Election Day, they received 380 phone calls and helped 700 people at the counter. Several of the other county officials in our organization volunteered on election night, myself included. It was really fun to be there and just participate in this nonpartisan activity. You know, we had people from various political and non-political affiliations that were all participating, and really I found it to be a community civic service kind of commitment from everyone that was there volunteering. But it takes a team of elections workers to do this work, not just on election day. There's a lot of work in advance and afterwards. Overall, it's been a busy year for the team. In addition to the primary and general elections, they conducted 2 off-cycle recall elections and had to recruit some key positions as people, some of the key individuals had retired or pursued opportunities elsewhere. They still found time to make this elections process fun by hosting the first ever coloring sheet contest and placing an Oregon-themed coloring sheet on the back of the Dropbox list included with each ballot. So these are fun things for, well, kids like to color, adults like to color too. I had fun with that. My family had fun participating in that. So we should also point out that many of the temporary election workers that we bring on board to help the ballot process, they're a critical part of the elections in Lane County, and our clerk Dina will be recognizing them for their help separately. In addition, our clerk staff, the deeds and records staff, also help in supporting that effort. So we want to recognize this this elections team today, again, for our core behavior of passion to serve, for just the incredible work, not just with this general election, but throughout the year that they do. So we have certificates here, and I want to, Dina, ask you if you have anything that you want to add to that.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here again. Mostly just want to take this time to thank my incredible team without crying. I couldn't do it without them. Small but mighty is accurate. There, including myself, there were 7 full-time staff that really were supported by many, but we couldn't have got through this election, and we kicked butt. We did really, really, really well. I'm just really proud to be a part of this team, and want to give all accolades right now to them and the 98 of our temporary election workers. And we're having a potluck with them in January at their request to kind of celebrate. So just thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all of you. I'm going to open it up to the board for comments, but I just want to preface by saying, this is a role that should be really, you shouldn't have to face some of the concerns that you do about your own safety in the course of just doing your job. So I know these are extraordinary times to be doing such important work, and we appreciate you. Turn it over to the board. Vice Chair. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, Commissioner Seneca.
Save me to step up.
Well, first of all, thank you. I think most, if not all of us, got the chance to tour elections during the process. I was lucky enough to tour it when it was in full busy mode. And it was great because Lauren and I got to kind of sit back and watch all the concerns as they come up about voting and the different issues people were having. And the way staff handled it was just incredible. And as long as that line was, because it was a line, I was amazed at how fast it was moving. These are real concerns. And it was interesting because it really reminded you of the voting process and how much it means to people. And it was awesome to see that right there at the forefront. So yeah, thank you for all the hard work you guys do. And, Lauren, I don't think it's an accident you have so many all-stars on your team. So thank you for everything you guys do.
Vice Chair.
Thank you again. Dina, I'm just so happy for you. I'm glad that things went without a hitch, that we didn't have a lot of safety issues and all that. And I think that just the attitude of the folks in the county shifted a little bit and maybe had some responsibility and accountability. So, yeah. Well, praise whoever that's for. I appreciate that. But I think the thing I told you just a minute ago when I was over there, the thing I really enjoyed most about going there and seeing the level of professionalism and the tenacity and the exactness and accuracy was just you giving tours and that little pesky little kid that was asking you all the questions. And he was asking some really great questions. It was almost like he was prepped by Google or something to give you all these questions. But even in all of that, under all the pressure you're under all the accounts and all the people at the counter, you took time and effort and sincerity and authenticity to just be the person you are, and that's a true professional, and you reflect that with your team, and your team reflects that from you. And you can't have a good team without a good team leader. Okay, and so you raised the bar, and you've done it really well. And so even helping almost 2,000 people in 2 days. Hello, I mean Chick-fil-A's not even doing that much business over there, are they? So you guys did a really good job. So I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Commissioner Beck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I too got a tour right in the midst of everything. And I absolutely agree with my fellow commissioners on all the accolades. I want to thank you for working for Lane County, because I know that you could do this elsewhere and you probably would be snatched to other cities because and other counties, because this work is hard and your professionalism is rare. In that you specialize in this particular division. And we need more of you, of course. Your team's too small. And hopefully we'll get there over time as your workload just continually increases. And how you do it is beyond me. But I appreciate the fact that you're doing it for Lane County specifically. We need you. We appreciate you. And I just was so impressed that there seems like the process is just down pat. You know what to do, and you just execute that process. And to all the volunteers that could be doing anything else with their time, and making that time for this really important foundation of our democracy is so wonderful. And if there's a way that we can appreciate them as well, I hope we can do that too. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. 77% turnout, that's pretty amazing. How many ballots did we count again?
213,085.
Yep, that's a lot. You know, I had a chance to tour, but the one thing I wanted to say is that there are a few areas of government that people expect 100% accuracy. And there's few areas of government where we can even pretend that we're giving 100% accuracy. Because there are so many things that we deal with. You're dealing with hundreds of thousands of ballots, and you do expect 100% accuracy. I witnessed that. I toured, you showed me how, well, this one, things that I wouldn't have caught ever with my eyes are being caught by your team to submit, to make sure that accuracy is being delivered. And I can report with confidence that your department is accurately reflecting the vote. And that confidence is an amazing thing to have when people are so critical of everything that we do in government. For me to be able to report that I've witnessed it myself, and I'm seeing accuracy. So marvelous job, and thank you for the tour. I came in the day after the election. You were too busy to see me, but I stopped by and brought a little voodoo into the building, and I hope that helped a little bit. But I wanted to say this, that the tour that you gave me, I wish we could put that on a video and have it cycle on PBS or someplace, just showing how true accuracy is achieved in a place where people expect, demand, and suspect inaccuracy. Bravo, thank you.
Well, what everyone said, thank you all. I think it is so important, a couple of themes about, your professionalism, your commitment to accuracy, the role that you play in our democracy. Talk about a public service and something that touches every single person. And what I also want to add that I really appreciate to all of you, and to Dean in particular, is you do it with some humor. And you want to have some fun while you're doing it. When you're doing serious work, it's important to have some fun while you're doing it. So I love the coloring sheet. I did one and had really fun, a lot of fun tracking them on social media too with the hashtag. So I'm a fan. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Great. And I think, is Tanya doing the photo op?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will move on to public comment. Thank you to those of you who came and waited. I think quarterly or so we do employee recognition, and hopefully folks who came to give public comment thinking their item was first enjoy learning a little bit more about what's happening here at Lane County with that item. So we'll move right into public comment. We'll start with anyone who signed up to speak here in person in Harris Hall. I do have 5 people signed up. Then I'll turn it over to Jessica to see if there's anyone wishing to present online, and then I'll check back in the hall to see if someone came later and didn't get a chance to fill in the sign-in sheet. When I call your name, I'll ask that you please step to the podium. State your name for the record. When you do, your 3 minutes will begin. Jessica will get a clock up on the wall, and then the floor will be yours. And so first up, we have Jeremy Shearer, and he will be followed by John Helmer. If you have materials, you can leave them on the table, and they'll get them to us. Thank you, sir.
My name is Jeremy Shearer, 8048 Thurston Road. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Chair. This afternoon, you will be reviewing a report on affordable housing. And I would like to give you a personal experience, particularly in the area of property line adjustments, one that the last 2 years my neighbor and I have been working through with the county. February 2022, my neighbor and I submitted for a property line adjustment. Our property was created in 1964 through a minor subdivision, which was approved by the Planning Commission and produced an unrecorded plat. Now, this unrecorded plat is called a finished plat at that time, but it is unrecorded. It's just, it's basically a piece of paper just like this with some scratch notes on it. It was approved as a replat, which required it to go through the statutory requirements of ORS 92. This ORS 92 does not apply to unrecorded plats, so we appealed that on the basis of ORS 92-180 and the actual definition of a replat, 92.010. Because in ORS 92, replats only apply to a recorded plat, and that's recorded with the county clerk. Ours is not recorded. It's actually filed with the planning department. So we appealed this and lost the case. We attempted to have it reconsidered on a couple, on the basis of a couple things, but one being that we believe that platting is within the jurisdiction of the county surveyor, and subdivision laws are within the jurisdiction of the planning department. And we believe that the HO was ruling on a jurisdiction of what would be a county surveyor issue. I asked for a waiver in this case because for the good of the community, a waiving of $1,000, that was denied. But I did have a promise that the code would change. The planning director assured me that it's okay because they would like to have me on a team to change the code to fix the problem. And I waited a year and a half and finally got back with the planning director, and it's not happening. So there's no code amendment to fix this issue. So I did have a meeting.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, your time has expired, but if you have materials for us,
it's all there.
staff will get them to us.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is John Helmer, who will be followed by Larry Craig.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm John Helmer, and I live in David Lovell's district. I'm here happily to report on a success and to give thanks. The success is that we now have 2 permanently placed track chairs, David's chairs, out at the Howard Buford Recreation Area. These are electronic devices for provide access to folks using wheelchairs and others. Everything's in place. We have a team of volunteers trained up, and people are out there using it. I'm one of those volunteers who are helping people, and the most recent experience was just a classic for me, which was a mother and a son. She's in her 90s, he's in his 70s, both with significant mobility issues. Got them set up and going. They'd never been to the Arboretum, never used a track chair before. They went off with the biggest smiles on their face. They spent 2 hours independently exploring that site. And that's something that never would have happened before. So a really exciting thing. I want to give thanks as well, because these things don't just happen. And in particular, in terms of the recurring funding to make this happen, we have a set of partners that should be thanked: the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, the Mackenzie River Trust, Travel Lane County, and really more than others, and all the others in terms of the amount contributed, is Lane County government. And particularly want to thank the Parks Department, the Equity Program, really everybody in the county that helped make this happen. There's also kind of a fun, unexpected twist, I realized, to report today. As I approached the lectern here, you might have seen I'm moving a little slow today. That's because I had my knee replaced just a couple weeks ago. This is my big outing of the day here. And so I'm just tottering around. Well, you know what? I have one of those chairs reserved for next week. And I point that out because that's actually typically a part of this kind of initiative. You plan it to serve a particular underserved group. You make reasonable accommodations, take an efficient approach to providing the service. And then there are these unexpected, unpredicted benefits. In this case, we plan it for folks using wheelchairs. Well, you know, that Helmer guy's out there limping out there next week to use it. So it's pretty exciting to see. I do want to say that, I expect other people like myself who are temporarily disabled to use it, so it will be fun to see how that goes. And finally, I just want to mention, too, it's too easy to pat ourselves on the back. It is a great thing, but it's really just a beginning when you think of the wealth of parks and all the folks who need help to see them. And with that, I'll step aside and welcome my good friends in this project, Larry Craig and Lauren Cushing.
Thank you. Next up is Larry Craig and Mr. Thiel. I'm not sure if Larry's going to want to use this mic here just for your feet. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Larry Craig, and I live in the Chairs District, Lori Traeger. I'm a longtime wheelchair user following a motorcycle accident in 1970, and I'm now retired after serving 38 years in emergency communications. I'm here today to talk about universal access and my gratitude for the track chairs that John was just sharing. Getting around in our community is pretty good in most paved areas. Curb cuts, initially designed for wheelchair users like me, also work well for people pushing strollers, bike riders and walkers alike. Our public transit system has lifts on all the buses and level platform access for the MX. I often see elderly riders and folks with walkers, casts, crutches, and strollers who benefit from the same access that I use. Getting out in nature is more challenging. Some areas lend themselves to paved universal access, like the bike and pedestrian paths we enjoy along the river here in Eugene. Others, like the elevated trails in the Howard-Buford Recreation Area and the sandy beaches on the coast, are challenging for many of us. Last spring, I heard about an electric track chair that could be reserved online for 2 hours, no fee, at Hasita Beach. I did that and met a volunteer who greeted me in the parking lot at the county park. After some brief instructions, I headed out across the soft sand with my friend walking alongside, and further all the way to the edge of the surf. And it was such a wonderful feeling to cross the sand and be at water's edge. I was a bit overcome with emotion. I had tears going down my cheeks. It had been 53 years since I'd been able to be on the beach. You just can't get through soft sand in a manual wheelchair. More recently, my friend Lauren Cushing, who's going to be following me, and I got to each check out a track chair at the Mount Pisgah Arboretum and explore some of the higher elevation trails that we could never do in our manual chairs. John Helmer hiked with us. That was before his knee surgery, and it worked great. The track chairs are quiet and travel at a nice walking pace, so we could all enjoy the trek together. I too would like to express my thanks to the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, the McKenzie River Trust, Travel Lane County, and the Lane County Parks Department, the Equity Program, and all the county and partner agency staff and volunteers for providing this service. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Lauren Cushing, who will be followed by Sam Schwartz.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Cushing. I'm from Veneta, and just a little personal profile. My career profile is a 36-year career as a physical therapist, and just the the entry or interactions with so many persons with new to disability. Pretty much anything off pavement was off limits, pretty much. And as Larry mentioned, his 50-year history not being on the beach, the David's Chair has opened up access for so many of us that have difficulty off-road. I'm thinking about some of my off-road experiences in my life as dealing with polio as a youth. I walked trails and I backpacked in my youth. In the 70s, 80s, I started using the chair to access trails, and trails that required that I was able to do independently, mostly as a grunt fest. Is the difficulty of accessing and needing a trail partner at times. But the joy of having this easy access, safe way to interact with the natural world is just very liberating and freedom-making. And I'm just so thankful for all the partners that made this happen. I just needed to kind of mention it to John as a possibility, and he took off with it. Again, it's wonderful to have a voice in access to environments that previous to David's Chair has pretty much been listed in the unable to go category, and it's just been fabulous to have these opportunities, and thank you for all the support, all you partners.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Sam Schwartz, and that's the final person I have signed up for this morning here in Harris Hall.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Sam Schwartz. I earned my PhD in computer science from the University of Oregon a few months ago. And I also happen to be one of Governor Kotek's appointees to the Electronic Portal Advisory Board, which helps oversee some of the state of Oregon's websites. I'm here before you in my just my personal capacity as an individual citizen and resident of Eugene here in Lane County. But I want to talk about cybersecurity. It's just one of these areas that doesn't always get to the top of people's minds. And, you know, when I think about these things, in my mind, there are really 4 risk areas generally associated with IT failure, whether that's due to unintentional operational failures or intentional cybersecurity attack. And these 4 risk areas are reputational risk, risk of financial loss, risk of data loss, and risk of system downtime. And so one of the things I just want to bring to, this board and this commission, and really any board or commission, are some questions at the governance level we might be, asking to our staff. And so I just want to list a couple. I've got a whole list of 35. I'm not going to list them all, but I'll just list a few and pass them to our wonderful county administrator. But regarding reputational risk, if we have, not if, but when we have a cybersecurity attack like Curry County had, unfortunately, a few months or a year or two ago, what's the plan to respond to that? You know, who's the point person for the press? Who's going to brief you guys? That sort of thing. Regarding financial risk, in the case of Curry County, they had a ransomware attack. What is the plan for the county if there is a demand for, billion. How do you respond to that? Or alternatively, how do you shut off, transactions to and from county coffers? Regarding data loss, are there backups anywhere? How often do they happen? How often are they tested for restoration? And then similarly for system downtime, if we had a big earthquake, there's been some earthquake activity on the coast. If the big one were to hit us, how long would it take us to get all of our computing systems back up online? So these are just a couple of questions. I don't have much more, but I figure, maybe once a year or so, it might not be the worst idea to have some sort of, conversation and work session. I don't know all the ins and outs of county, logistics, but have some sort of conversation to figure out at the governance level, how are we working with cybersecurity and technology issues? Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you for your public comment. Jessica, is there anyone signed up online wishing to give comment to the board this morning?
Commissioners, we do not have any members of the public joining us virtually.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who came after the sign-in sheet was handed up who wishes to speak? Is that a hand raised back there? No? Really? Great. Then that concludes public comment, and I'll turn it over to the board for any response to public comment, other issues or remonstrance this morning. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I appreciate people coming out at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, particularly for your group that spoke on David's chair. Thank you for coming in and giving personal testimony about how that affects you. When this comes, some of these funding items come across our desk in order to approve. Conceptually, I know it's a great idea, but I can easily forget about the substantial impact it makes on residents in our community. And when you come to speak to us, that just reminds me of why, that was so important when it came across our desks for approval. And I need that reminder. I really do. I'm so pleased that it works for you, and also really pleased to hear that it works for other groups of people that I would not have thought about. And even as a mother, I should have known that, somebody with a child in a carrier would want to be able to use that too. And since my kid is past that age, I forget about those things. It's easy to do if it doesn't affect you personally sometimes. So thank you for taking the time to come and tell us how much that affects you. And it gives me a reminder of why we need to continue those things. I really appreciated the fact that you mentioned that this is just the beginning of accessibility features that we could incorporate in our parks and other divisions that we may not be thinking of yet. And if there are those opportunities of, other great ideas that, just wouldn't otherwise cross our minds, please let us know. And sometimes the personal conversation and the personal testimony makes all the difference. So thank you for coming.
Commissioner Senega.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Jeremy Shear had to leave, but I would just like to thank him for coming in and talking about some of his concerns with the lot line adjustments. I know he also has a job and it's hard to get here at 9 o'clock, so I'm sure he'll watch this later. Mr. Helmer, I thought I recognized you this morning. Good to see you again. And I appreciate you guys coming in, and Mr. Craig and Mr. Cushing. When you mentioned not seeing the being to the ocean's edge in 53 years, I mean, I could feel the emotion in that, and I know Commissioner Farr's there a lot. There's nothing more breathtaking than being on that water's edge and just looking out as far as you can, and those are things that people take for granted, and so this David's chair is just, I absolutely love it. Along with, Brett, the Moby mats, I'm still getting compliments on those out there. and a lot of them is mothers and fathers with strollers pushing their kids out. You know, a lot of times you'll have the 2 or 3 year old, they're a ball of fire for a little bit, and then not, you've got to bring them back somehow. So I love what we're doing here. You know, I'm proud of Wayne County to be on the forefront of a lot of this. So thanks for coming and sharing with us.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. You know, I wish Jeremy Shearer were still here, because earlier when I was talking about elections, I was talking about the demand for perfect accuracy. That's one area in government that we can hope for perfect accuracy. Clearly in land use, we do not have perfect accuracy. So John Helmer, gosh, you're always here. You're always serving Lane County. You're always doing good things and reporting on good things. It's always wonderful to see you in the room, because it generally is a report on good news. And that's been historically the case for the 12 years I've been sitting here. So thank you for that. I wanted to point out that some of the things, the David's chair and the track access that you're pointing out, is something we don't take for granted, and it is just a step in the direction of providing access to people that folks who have full mobility take for granted. Recently, back on September 24th, 25th, I was in England visiting my family, and my cousin Christine is a double amputee. She's in a chair, and she took us on a tour to the South Walk of London. And now, London's an old town. And we actually went over Tower Bridge, she in a chair and her husband, and she's very, very mobile, very able to handle it. But I got to tell you, London is not accessible at all. Getting up onto Tower Bridge, it took a great deal of effort to get her up onto the Tower Bridge so we could walk across, things that I personally take for granted because of my relatively free mobility. So what we're doing here in Lane County, I think, can be at the forefront of providing access, can be at the forefront, and we've got to really keep our eye on that. So keep reporting, keep telling, and keep bringing this good news. And because the more good news we hear, the more we're inclined to act on good news and try to provide more good news. So thanks for being here this morning. And I wanted to really especially thank Larry and Lauren for your personal accounting of the use of David's chair, for instance. So thank you for being here this morning.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Larry, Lauren, and John. Sounds like a band name almost, doesn't it? Yeah. John, you always bring great nuggets to the board. You drop really great stuff, and I'm just so appreciative of what you do for the community. Also, I'm really curious to see how that ride goes, if you learn to drift the corners on that track chair a little bit. I'm interested in that. But, you know, Lauren, you said something that was very significant. You said anything off pavement was off limits. And that really struck me because, you know, just recently I had some visitors from Uganda come here, and it was the first time that my friend's wife was able to get a visa to leave her country. Her whole life has not been given permission to leave the country of Uganda. And sometimes when we have such freedoms, we forget, like all our colleagues have been saying. And when you said that anything off pavement was off limits, that's not even in my scope of imagination. But for you to bring that back to us, to tell us that we need to continue to make ways to bring limitless things to our people who are having disabilities, to off-pavement experiences, that is a really great mantra statement and a mission statement that I'm going to take to heart. So I sincerely appreciate that. And to Dr. Sam, who got us some security awareness, we have a great IT team. I'll tell you, they are on it. They're so on it that I got 3 days to change my password, and I am not looking forward to it. So I thank you for reminding me about that. But yeah, we have a great team, and I think also kudos again to our team that went to Curry County and assisted them in a really dynamic and great way and got them out of a really dire straits. So I think we're on that, Dr. Sam, and thanks for bringing it to our attention, because we can always be better. We can always sharpen our pencil in every area. So thanks again.
Thank you. Well, thanks for pointing that out, Vice Chair. I was going to offer to Dr. Schwartz, if you send an email, we'd be happy to connect you with our TS folks so you can learn more about what we are doing. And then if you see gaps or ways to do better, I'm sure one of the best things about Mike Finch, our director in that department, is he's always open to new ideas and is, so thank you for that. To the folks who came, it's good to see you, Larry. Really appreciate you being here. It's such an important yet another example. We heard from some folks from a different angle last week about the importance of our DEI work and really embracing it and the full breadth and scope of what we mean when we talk about diversity of experience, equity, Does everybody have an opportunity to participate? And inclusion, who's included by definition, not being exclusive. This is just one of many examples of a program that exemplifies how we embrace our DEI work at Lane County. And I really like that you brought up the curb cuts also benefit people with strollers or pulling a wheelie suitcase when they're traveling or whatever it might be. You know, I often talk about the way we can think of equity is if the community, and it is a large circle. If we pitch all of our funding and programs and focus somewhere in the center, large or small, we continue to leave people out on the edges. But if we focus on the edges, what are the most barriers and the most challenges and who's facing them, and pitch our investments and our policy and our solutions there, it includes everyone from the outside in. So curb cuts are a great example of that. And John, you mentioned, congratulations, you're walking great, we'll honor your knee. You mentioned talking about people who are, you were temporarily disabled. We are all temporarily abled. At some point in just about everyone's life, there's going to come a moment, whether it's just a couple of weeks because you sprained an ankle or a life-changing incident or accident that has you living in a chair for the rest of your life or anything in between. Every single one of us will experience a time when we could benefit from a more even surface to walk on or the curb cut or a lower button to push to get in an elevator. Or I was at a performance this weekend, the hearing loops, for example, that we've heard about that are being put in different performance venues in our community. It's just so important to remind us, not that we aren't all reminded every day of the experience of being in a human body and all the challenges, but it's really great to have real life examples and to hear your experiences, and really appreciate you being vulnerable in that way too and coming and sharing about your history. And I know that is a question that a lot of people ask, and why are you in a chair? What happened? And folks don't always want to share that, so thank you for opening up about that as well. Thank you all very much for being here. Great. With that, we will move on to the business of the day, and the first item there is our consent calendar. These are all items considered routine. The materials the board has had available to review to consider these items is available online, and they are passed in a single motion with no discussion. So I'll look for that motion now.
Chair, I move adoption and approval of the consent calendar for Tuesday, December 10th, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Thank you. To approve today's consent calendar. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. Next, we have from County Council. Welcome. Good morning. Steve Thiel is with us. I saw Becky Taylor earlier, but she did about okay. This is our regular report on what we call FCIT, or the Fatal Crash Investigation Team. So I will. Steve, are you going to introduce the item, or what? Just two Steves. Pick a Steve. Any Steve.
Do you want to take it?
Sure.
Okay, great. Good morning from the Office of County Council, Steve Thiel.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. I'll have you introduce the item and walk us through it.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Happy to be here. We're here today with the Fatal Crash Investigation Team report. Fatal Crash Investigation Team, or FCIT, was created in 2017 when the board adopted the county's Transportation Safety Action Plan, made a commitment to work towards 0 deaths. This team includes members from Public Health, Public Works, and the Sheriff's Office. We report to the board twice a year. Since our last report in June, there have been 3 more fatal crashes on county roads, resulting in 4 deaths. The individual investigations are confidential, but we report aggregate findings on contributing factors to identify system-wide issues. The latest findings on countywide crash trends is included in the agenda packet. And now Public Works will present the key findings from that report.
Good morning, board. Please hold while I get our technology prepared. And as Chair, as you acknowledged, Becky Taylor unfortunately had to step aside. She wasn't feeling well this morning, but I know she extends her apologies. Thank you for your patience.
See that button? Help, it needs Cameron.
Thank you. everyone. Good morning. My name is Cassidy Mills. I'm the Transportation Planning Supervisor within Engineering and Construction Services. Thank you so much. And as I mentioned, I'm here on speaking on behalf of Becky Taylor, who unfortunately had to step away. Despite our policy commitment to work towards zero deaths, we have seen an increase in fatal and serious injury crashes on county roads in rural Lane County. We have not had sufficient resources to implement life-saving interventions, such as roadway engineering safety improvements, or enough officers to enable proactive patrol. On county roads outside the Eugene-Springfield metro area, there were 1,644 crashes reported between 2018 and 2022, which is an average of 329 crashes per year. The percent of these crashes resulting in fatal or serious injury is at an all-time high. In 2022, 14 people lost their lives and 47 people were seriously injured, like head trauma, spinal cord damage, and broken bones. Survivors of traffic crashes often experience post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression due to the trauma of the event. This is an overwhelming problem to solve. So we start by looking at what's the most severe problem, what's creating the most risk, and where is the greatest potential to intervene to save lives. This chart shows the greatest risk contributing to fatal and serious injury crashes. In Lane County, those are roadway departures, crashes involving drugs and alcohol, speed, aging drivers, and bicycles. The blue bar shows the percent of fatal and serious injury crashes on county roads involving those attributes. Further, those issues are worse than statewide averages, which are shown in the orange bars. We've reported in the past how the prevalence of drugs and alcohol in these crashes is on the rise, but now you can see here on this chart how startling the data is, involving 45% of all fatal and serious injury crashes, which is double the 22.4% statewide average. The second leading driver behavior risk is excessive speed, involved in 28% of the serious crashes on county roads, which is comparable to the statewide average of 24%. Crashes involving people on bicycles is also significantly greater on county roads, representing 25% of fatal and serious injury crashes than the statewide average, which is 4%. Aging drivers over 65 years of age are overrepresented in fatal and serious injury crashes, involved in 25% of crashes on county roads and 22% statewide. And roadway departure crashes continues to be the leading crash type, representing 62% of all fatal and serious injury crashes. This is just baseline information about big picture problems. Over the coming year, we will be able to refine this knowledge thanks to a federal grant that we have secured from the Federal Highway Administration's Safe Streets and Roads for All program. You will, in the future, hear about it referred to SS4A, another acronym in our industry. The crash data findings memo included in the agenda packet and highlighted in today's presentation was developed by DKS, which is a local engineering firm with safety expertise. The federal grant is paying for this consulting service. The crash data analysis will be supplemented by an evaluation of high-risk road features from boots-on-the-ground analysis. We should have a fuller understanding of the priority problems this coming spring. Then, in the summer, we should have recommendations to solve these problems. The funding will enable the development of actual design concepts of up to 10 roadway projects for location-specific solutions. We will be reaching out to potentially affected communities at the time to determine what the public support is for these design concepts. We'll also be evaluating all recommendations for potential impacts on priority populations through an equity impact assessment. Toward the end of 2025, we'll be asking the board to approve the final plan. At the time of planned adoption later next year, we'll be asking the board for an official public commitment. The board has already made a commitment to work towards zero deaths with the 2017 Transportation Safety Action Plan. The 2025 plan needs to take that one step further with a timeline. This plan is required to access federal funding to implement solutions that will save lives. The timeline requirement must either establish a target date for achieving zero roadway fatalities and serious injuries, or an ambitious percentage reduction of roadway fatalities and serious injuries by a specific date with an eventual goal of eliminating roadway fatalities and serious injuries. So we don't need that decision now. And we'll be developing more specific recommendations before then. But we are excited that we have the funding to support this work and look forward to bringing you the final plan in the coming year. Any questions?
Steve, did you want to add anything before we?
No, thank you, Chair.
To the board. Questions, comments? Vice Chair.
Thank you. Cassidy, thanks for the presentation. And you and I work together at MPC. You do a great job. You keep me in line and give me the needed information. Just recently, I know you heard about the deaths of the youth at Beacon and River Road. And so we're getting quite some traction on that and some comments and some concerns. And someone asked me the other day, what can we do about specific items of concern that continue to be items of concern? And frankly, I didn't have a roadmap of which to tell folks what to do, who to contact, who to write for. So maybe just going forward, especially on those 10 roadway projects that we have upcoming of 2025, how the public can engage in their concerns and their input, as we've done in MPC all the time. So we're always concerned with that. But just in this meeting, how can someone who may be listening and is concerned about that recent accident, how could they help in the immediate future to help us focus more on what we should be doing?
Thank you for your thank you for your question, Vice Chair. Yes, public involvement is so critical to this work because it's one of the many E's of our safe systems approach. So when we look at crash history, crash patterns, we're looking at how can we implement engineering interventions, how can we implement public education campaigns. We really try and approach these crashes as a multidisciplinary issue. And so if I was speaking to a member of the public interested in advocating for transportation safety in their community, I would encourage them to reach out to the jurisdiction responsible for a corridor. So in the instance of the Beacon Road crash, which was absolutely devastating to hear about. My heart goes out to the families in the community who are impacted by this loss. I would reach out to the transportation policy officials within those jurisdictions. In this instance, both Lane County and the City of Eugene are going to collaborate on identifying safety interventions. So reaching out to transportation planners and engineers within their communities. So again, Lane County, City of Eugene, even the City of Springfield, depending on where you live. And then I would also encourage folks to speak to their families. We have a lot of parents who have brand new drivers in their families, maybe folks who are just getting their driver's licenses. How can we create a culture of safety within our families and talk about what transportation safety means for each of our families? And then if you see something, say something. If you notice that there should be a stop sign where you feel like there should be a stop line, reach out to the government officials responsible for that roadway and see if there's an opportunity to explore safety interventions. Now, on the topic of the safety action plan, as I mentioned, there will be some really intentional community engagement events coming forward from this plan, which will give community members an opportunity to engage in the proposed roadway design changes. And so I encourage folks to get out and get involved in these conversations so that they can see that the change they'd like to see in their communities.
Yeah, good work. Thank you.
Commissioner Senega and then Commissioner Farr.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, Vice Chair, you read my mind with, of course, what I was thinking about as West Lane Commissioner. I spent a good portion of the day yesterday with constituent calls. And yes, Cassidy, I reached out to Becky Taylor yesterday morning, and we came up with a list of things that were already in the works for that intersection. You know, like one thing she mentioned was a grant that we'd already put in for the National Safety Security Council to turn that into a safety corridor. And, but you know, I have a question, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and if you don't have an answer, I completely understand. But you know, when you're talking to a lot of the neighbors that we're talking to law enforcement that was out there and have been discussing different issues. And I'm always surprised at the range of solutions for these kind of problems. I mean, this is a pretty standard intersection with pretty standard speeds. there are a couple of variables. I mean, the big trees and it's dark out there. There's no street lights. And it is that right on the cusp of Eugene and county. I mean, so, you know what? I'm just surprised that there's not a solution that we know it works good for this scenario. I mean, punch in the algorithm and it says roundabout or, you know, street lights, the illuminative paint, stuff like that. What are we doing to get to just actual solutions on these kind of intersections?
I think that's an excellent question, Commissioner Seneca, and I'm glad you were able to connect with Becky yesterday on what engineering solutions are going to be explored within this particular instance. And I do think that crashes are nuanced. And so that's why when we are responding to an incident, whether it's a fatal or severe crash, we really try and look at the Swiss cheese model. So what are the engineering interventions that we can deploy? Is there an opportunity to get more law enforcement support so that that area can be patrolled more intensely? Is there an education campaign that needs to be deployed? And so those are the various E's that form a protective layer for our communities where we can look at a problem and think, oh, this might not be a one solution problem, but it can be a multiple solutions problem. And how are we identifying each of the appropriate interventions from each of the different perspectives and angles and come at it holistically as a community? Because this isn't going to be a solution that's solved behind somebody's desk, but it's a solution that can be arrived at with thoughtful people coming together to think intentionally about solving a problem for our community's public health. And so in this particular instance, we'll look at the cause of the crash and if it was related to speed. And admittedly, I haven't seen the crash report yet, so I'm flying a little bit blind on the details, respectfully. But we'll be able to look into the details of the crash and see, was it a lighting issue? Is it a speed reduction issue? And come up with the proven engineering interventions we know work and see what's appropriate in this context.
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer, and I think that is what we're all working towards. I mean, for example, another spot on River Road, one customer wants rumble strips. I mean, because there's a corner that a lot of people don't notice, dark, sleepy, whatever, but other neighbors don't because they're noisy. And so, I mean, once again, Becky Taylor and our engineering team, we're putting illuminated chevrons out there to try and alleviate that same corner. So that is, you know, to your point, there are lots of different solutions to get to that goal. It's just implementing the correct ones. So, thank you.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Chair. You know, this is never my favorite meeting, hearing the results, but it's always encouraging to hear the progress that we are making in certain areas. And when we can identify very specific areas that need attention and focus our attention upon that, like lane departure that involves fixed obstacles off the road. We remove trees and on London Road, for instance, on Highway 126, which is not our jurisdiction, but the same fatalities, the same reason for fatalities exist, and we take care of them. And I look at crashes near schools, focused on Bethel School District, focused on Fern Ridge School District, in fact, entirely. And Meadowview School is where my two of my grandchildren go to school, top of the list. So it makes me think, what is it? And it's complex traffic patterns, complex modes of transportation, pedestrian, bicycles, school buses, delivery trucks, impatient papas taking kids to school, you know, whatever it may be. And I can't help but think that a lot of the crashes in these instances are because of a failure to obey traffic laws, whether it's speeding, a big one, stop signs, we mentioned another one, lane changes, et cetera, turn signals, et cetera. And it points out something that we all know, that our Sheriff's Department is underfunded. They can't even fund burglaries. They can't even respond to burglaries, let alone provide traffic patrol. You know, there's very little. So it would say, well, if we put a sheriff's car close to each school, that will make people think about it. Now, I think about when I used to drive into Yachats, and every time you drive into Yachats, there's a police car. You know it's an empty police car, but it makes you look at your speedometer. And it makes you more conscious of the way you're driving, which you sometimes forget. Some people are lighting a cigarette, some people are smoking, or drinking coffee, some people are texting. But if you see a cop car, you tend to move back into your, well, I'm driving first, aren't I? But if we could just have more cop cars, to provide that level of personal accountability for how I am driving, because it's so easy to be tuning the radio or doing other things. But if you see speed limit 20, your speed 34, that, of course, gives you a reason to focus on your driving. If you see a cop car, all of a sudden, for many of us, you think of, the first thing you might think of is, oh, I'm going to get a ticket. But the direct impact of that is you become a safer driver. You will be a safer driver if there are greater patrols. That's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
This is clearly a chronically underfunded venue of our roads and bridges in counties, and legislatively this session they're likely addressing ODOT's needs more than county needs. We really have a broken financial system for how we account for ongoing operations and corrective means for our roads and bridges. As counties who are responsible for the maintenance of such extensive amount of roadways, we need to be at the table to talk about solutions, but the resources really need to come from the Fed or the state level. We simply don't have the general fund money to really make massive amounts of difference in this area. And when it comes to transportation, we know it costs a lot of money. And sometimes we can make some cheaper adjustments, but they're not always going to be enough. And it takes large grant monies to make any significant improvement on the issue. And so it's just a way of encouraging us to continue to talk about this with our federal and state delegation, especially as they go into this legislative session, knowing that we don't have the resources or the capacity to increase the resources at this local level for the need that is there. And for those on our transportation committees, this is the challenge of counties in general. So I don't want to say there's no solutions, because there are, and people are proposing solutions all the way. But we need to get that funding and pull it back to our counties in order to make the work actually happen. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think it's interesting, timely that we had this really terrible incident happen right as we're about to get this report. So I think it's sort of coloring a little bit how we're receiving the FCIT report in particular. And I also just want to appreciate you and Becky Taylor and the folks in your shop for being so responsive. I think many of us, obviously Commissioner Senega, with this being in your district, I'm sure had lots of calls, but just people in the community who know each of us, who they reach out to. So I heard from folks, and you and Becky were really responsive, and I know there's a meeting coming up with the City of Eugene folks and their Vision Zero program managers to talk about this. This often happens, right? It's happened in Commissioner Lovall's district out on Main Street, where these are like catalyzing events, and they're devastating and they're awful, but hopefully sometimes something good comes out of them for an area that's needed attention for a while. And it's just, as Commissioner Buck mentioned, it's hard to be so under-resourced. As Commissioner Farr mentioned, we need more patrol, but if we can engineer and create the conditions that make people safer, then we put less strain on the patrol. So we need all of it. We need all of it. So thank you for that and for the presentation. Can you remind me, or Mr. Thiel, how do we get an FCIT report annually or twice a year?
Twice a year.
Twice a year. Okay, great. So perhaps when this particular incident isn't so fresh, folks will have a little more to ask about the program overall. But thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Right. That moves us into item 8, which is a human resources item. So I see our human resources officer, Alana Holmes, is with us, as well as Eliza Kaczynski, who is a senior classification and compensation analyst. And we have up to 45 minutes allotted for this item. And just to note, we have an 11 a.m. time certain with outside presenters up in the conference room. So it seems like we have plenty of time to do this and then make the transition. So, and Christine Moody, our budget and finance manager, welcome. And are you going to introduce the item?
I'll just make a quick comment, Chair, that this has been, you're going to get a lot of information and you've had some updates on this effort, but just to kind of paint the picture, we've had this classification system for non-represented employees, of which we have about 300 in Lane County, for well over a decade. And for at least the past decade that I've been here, we've complained about this system because it is administratively burdensome. It requires a lot of review. It's challenging oftentimes to get market comparables for positions because we have these really broad classifications and we lump groups of employees into those broad classifications. Every other group of employees in Lane County has more specific classifications, very specific to their duties. And so Eliza's going to go through this, but this has been a 2-year project to get to where we're at, to really design a whole new system we're going to move to. And at the end of the day, you'll see a number of changes that we're asking for approval on, but we expect that this will result in a much more manageable classification system for non-represented employees that will make it less administratively burdensome, easier to find matches in the market, fewer requests for reclassification and questions about classification and those types of issues. So I just want to express appreciation to the team that has worked on this, especially Eliza, for all of the effort. A lot of people did not want to take this on because it's a big lift, and it was really Eliza coming on board and saying, well, she's going to tackle this and having the support to do it. So turn it over to Eliza, but just wanted to paint that broad picture for you all and what we're trying to achieve.
And I guess I'm supposed to share my screen. Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. We are here today to present recommended compensation adjustments for non-represented classifications with a proposed effective date of January 2025, and as well adjustments to the health insurance plan for non-represented staff with an effective date of January 2026. The Board of County Commissioners has the responsibility for fixing salary ranges for each classification in the county. The county is committed to providing competitive compensation for its employees, which balances the need to recruit and retain talented staff with stewardship of public resources and funds. The bulk of the county staff are represented in one of the 8 bargaining units, and compensation for those staff is discussed and updated as part of negotiations with the bargaining units. However, there are approximately 360 positions across 130 classifications that are not represented. This action would update compensation for these non-represented classifications. In order to create consistency for employees, for a number of years, the county has reviewed compensation for non-represented classifications on a 3-year cycle, as happens for our represented employees in the course of bargaining and negotiations. The proposal before you is both the result of that regular 3-year review, as well as the final step in a project to shift the classification methodology used for non-represented staff to be more aligned with the way we work with represented staff. The proposal includes adopting a new salary plan for use with non-represented staff, and that salary plan incorporates within it a 4.3% cost of living adjustment. It also assigns all the non-represented classifications to a grade on that new salary plan based on a market analysis, setting the minimum and maximum salary for each classification. It includes 2 future COLAs, cost of living adjustments for non-represented staff, one in 2026 and one in 2027, based on the consumer price index using the methodology that was included in the 4 collective bargaining agreements that were negotiated this year. It also approves changes to the health insurance plan consistent with the changes that were included in the collective and bargaining agreements this year. There we go. To provide some historical context, non-represented staff have been receiving a 1 or 2% COLA each year for a number of years. This is consistent with what has been provided to most represented staff in those years. There's been a market review and adjustment on average every 3 years, and we have this, there we go. The methodology used to create the proposal as well as this timing is consistent with what has been done historically and how represented staff are addressed, their compensation is addressed. There is one element that's a little different this year though, and that is the creation of the new salary plan. Because of some challenges with our previous classification methodology for non-represented staff, the county embarked on a project to develop a new classification system for non-represented staff. This timeline shows that project. You can see it began towards the end of 2022, and we spent much of 2023 designing the classification system and identifying classification placements. The board approved the new classification system in January of 2024, and it became effective in July of 2024. These earlier phases of the project did not include any compensation adjustments for non-represented staff. It was just the classifications that we were working with at that phase. Because the salary plan previously used for the non-represented staff was heavily tied into the old classification methodology, that necessitated creating a new salary plan as well. If the salary plan is adopted and the new non-represented classifications are placed onto it, that would complete this project. The salary plan is basically just the list of all the possible wage ranges and the wages associated with each step on those ranges. The new salary plan is structured with even spacing between the grades and steps. There's about 2% between each grade, 4% between each step, and a range spread, which is the difference between the top and the bottom of the range of 37%. This range spread and structure is more similar both to our represented group salary plans, as well as the salary plans used by our comparators. Once we had designed the salary plan, we identified what grades classifications would be placed on by starting with a market review. To conduct, okay, now I'm way ahead on my slides. There we go. To conduct a market review, we use the same process that we use consistently for all of our bargaining units and elected officials. We identified matching classifications at our 5 county comparators, which are Clackamas, Deschutes, Jackson, Marion, and Washington, and identified total compensation, which includes not just base wages, but the value of benefits such as retirement, paid leave, and health insurance. We then averaged our comparators' compensation at the midpoint of their salary ranges and used that to identify what grade to assign to our classifications. If we had 5 matching classifications, we identified the grade on our new salary plan that was within plus or minus 5% of the comparators and placed it there. If there were 3 or 4 matches, we did include imputed data points for the missing matches to produce stronger averages with a smaller margin of error before identifying the grade. This is the same process we used when completing market analysis for AFSCME this year. So to use a hypothetical example, if the average compensation for matching classifications at our comparators was $38.50, at the midpoint, that classification would be placed on grade 18, since the midpoint of grade 18 is within 5% difference of that range. And this is a hypothetical example. We don't have a ferry operations supervisor. We wanted to pick a classification that didn't actually exist.
Is that?
We were able to place 88 classifications based directly on the market data. There were 42 classifications where we did not have enough market data to place directly based on those averages. So in those cases, the grade was assigned based on the classification's relationship to other classifications where there was sufficient market data. So if we had good market data for analyst, but not for a senior analyst, we would look at the relationship between those two to do the placement. We also reviewed for compression, which is when a supervisory classification makes less or close to the same as the classification that reports directly to it, and we made adjustments to alleviate places where there were compression. Because the salary plan is new, the new grades and the current grades that we're using don't line up exactly, so there was a little bit of difference that came out of just the numbers not lining up exactly in these different grades. The current wage rate for 59 of the classifications was already within that 5% from the comparator average. So those classifications ended up on a grade that was pretty close to their current wage range, though again, some differences due to the change in the salary plan. There were 71 classifications where the current salary range was more than 5% below the comparator average. Those were placed on a grade that was higher than their current grade, and so those would be the classifications we consider as getting a market adjustment. This pattern of market adjustments isn't surprising. We saw something similar with AFSCME, where the primary difference being that there was a greater percentage of classifications that needed more modest market adjustments and fewer that were completely aligned. So that's why we recommended an across-the-board increase there, whereas we're doing more targeted adjustments for the non-reps.
Just really quickly, you said 71, so did you misspeak or is the slide inaccurate? Did you mean to say 51 or am I not tracking what you were referring to?
There were 59 classifications that were aligned with the market and then 71 that were out of alignment with the market.
Oh, it's the cumulative total of the three to the right of that. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Step placement for non-reps for this is going to be based on an equal pay audit, which involved reviewing the education, experience, and seniority of all the non-represented staff and ensuring that their placement and differences in pay for those in the same classification was based on a consistent system that accounts for the bona fide factors allowed under the Oregon Equal Pay Law. The methodology that was used for the equal pay review was the same that was used to determine wage placements for new hires, promotions, and transfers, and as was used when conducting equal pay audits for represented classifications. Almost all of our represented classifications have been audited and aligned using this methodology already. After we did all of the placements, we took the salary plan that we've been using for that work and increased the whole thing by 4.3% to incorporate a cost of living adjustment. So if the salary plan we were using had a step on it that was $19 an hour, that was increased to $19.82. And the salary plan that you're being asked to adopt, and that is included in the packet, reflects that 4.3% increase. The 4.3% is based on the CPIU West Region annual average percentage for calendar year 2023, and was the same COLA that was received by the 4 bargaining units who negotiated contracts this year. The board order also includes non-rep COLAs for 2026 and 2027 based on CPI using the same methodology that we are using for AFSCME, PAA, and FAPO. The only difference is that AFSCME and the other represented groups would receive their COLAs in July, whereas the non-reps would get theirs in January. With this methodology of applying the COLAs with only 3 exceptions, all non-represented employees would get at least a 4% increase, with most receiving a little bit more between the impacts of the salary plan adjustments and the market adjustments and so forth. No employees will be receiving a decrease in pay as part of this, and even the 3 exceptions will receive an adjustment of at least 2.5%. The 3-year cost for these adjustments is between $15,650,000 and $16,640,000. The bulk of this cost is from the COLA and the market adjustments. For year 1, this costing includes the 4.3% COLA, as well as the market adjustments and the impacts from the changes to the salary plan and step placements based on equal pay analysis. For year 2, it includes a 2.7% COLA. While that number is not finalized yet because we're not done with this calendar year yet, and still could change slightly based on what the CPI does over the next month, we are close enough to the end of the year to make a reasonable estimate of what that number might be. For year 3, we have a min and max costed out, looking at a 2% minimum and a 3.5% maximum. while the potential range for the new COLA, as in the board order, is between 2% and 5%. Given current economic conditions, that narrower range is the more likely scenario. I did want to take a second to discuss the reason for some of these larger adjustments than we have seen in the past, both with non-reps and AFSCME and some of our other represented groups. It has been an exceptional few years when it comes to inflation and changes in the market wages. This chart compares Lane County's wages and our COLAs and adjustments to the average of our comparator counties, as well as some broader economic indicators. So it looks at our average COLAs, or our COLAs for the past 3 years for non-reps, as well as the average of our comparator COLAs. It also has on there the employment cost index, which is a statistic from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that looks at nationally how much wages are increasing for employees. And I also included the national CPI, a consumer price index, on there as well. The county has been giving 1% to 2% COLAs for the past few years. If you presume a $15 an hour wage back in 2021, with our COLAs, that would become, bring it up to just under $16 an hour now. By comparison, our comparator counties gave much larger adjustments, and they track the broader economic indicators much more closely, to the point where it's actually a little hard to see their line on there because it's so closely aligned with that EIC employment cost index line. A $15 an hour wage in 2021 at our comparators would be a little over $17 an hour there now. This creates a pretty big gap between Lane County's non-represented wages and the comparator counties and the economic indicators. The recommended COLA combined with the grade adjustments based on market comparison helps close that gap and bring Lane County's non-represented compensation in line with both our comparator counties and those broader economic trends. This version of the chart shows where we fall in comparison to our comparators and the broader economic indicators after the proposed COLA is applied and the market-based grade adjustments are accounted for. The change in methodology for determining the COLA amount based on the consumer price index helps prevent such large gaps from occurring in the future, since 4 of our 5 comparators use that methodology to determine their COLAs, and it is tied to those broader economic indicators. We did present all of this information and receive feedback from the director's team at several points throughout this process. We have been communicating about these potential changes with non-represented staff. An email went out to all non-represented staff letting them know that this was on the board agenda. And then we also created an FAQ page with lots of details about the process, about how we got here. I mentioned a couple slides ago that there were about 3 outliers who will be receiving less than a 4% increase. We did have individual conversations with each one of those people, as well as anyone else that we were able to identify in advance who might have more in-depth questions or who were in some kind of unique situation. I'm doubtful we were able to proactively identify everyone who might have questions that aren't on the FAQ page. So we're anticipating that we will have more of those conversations, individual conversations, over the next few weeks. If the board approves the adjustments, all non-reps will receive an individualized letter, hopefully by the end of this week, that includes their step and grade placement and their new wage. We are also asking the board to approve some changes to the health insurance plan. This is intended to provide more stability to the county's healthcare costs in the future. Full details of the proposed changes are in your packet. These changes are consistent with the changes that the bargaining units agreed to this year and are scheduled to be effective January 1, 2026. In addition to the impact of the changes themselves, having consistent health plan designs reduces administrative costs for managing the plans. If the board approves, the new salary plan, market adjustments, and COLA will go into effect the first pay period of January 2025. The health insurance changes will go into effect on January 1, 2026, which is the same day that they would become effective for AFSCME. And the 2 additional COLAs would happen in the first pay period of January 2026 and 2027. HR staff recommends that the board approve the adjustments to the non-represented salary plan and compensation, as well as the adjustments to the health insurance plan design as outlined in the board order in your packets. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the thorough presentation and all the materials in the packet. I'll turn it over to the board. Any questions or comments for staff? Vice Chair.
Hey, just generally speaking, you'd said it took 2 years to make this plan and put it into place. Does this plan have some longevity to kind of keep us on pace 10 years into the future so you don't have to spend 2 years of your staff time redoing this all again?
Yes, this was sort of a one-time reset. We will be looking at market again in 3 years. But first of all, that process will be a lot easier now that we have this new plan classification system in place. And that process of the market review is much less intensive than the process of redesigning the whole plan. I would anticipate that this would last us around 20 years, because it seems to be about 20 years between times when we are like, well, we need to take a deep look at our classification system.
Yeah, well, good job. According to Alana's smile, it's a real welcome affair to have this happen, so well done.
Absolutely correct, Vice Chair.
Commissioner Soniga.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation, Eliza. I really appreciate it. And you covered it multiple times. So there were some people that didn't get the 4.3 cost of living increase, right? Sounds like 3 of them.
So there were 3 people who got less than 4%, who would be getting, if you approve this, a less than 4%. There were a handful of additional people who, due to basically rounding, are at 4.25%. So that's a penny here or there for them. But there were those 3 people who had had been in unique situations prior to this, and we were not able to do that full 4.3% for them.
So what would if you did, because a lot of work here, and so so I understand, if you did give the 4.3 across, what would that do with the steps? Just nobody fit in that step, or they were above their step?
So the individuals who wouldn't be getting the 4.3 were ones who were previously above the top of their salary range, and adjusting the salary ranges, doing the market adjustments and put them within their salary range, but the change wasn't enough to get them that full 4.3%. And so if we applied it to those individuals, what that would mean is that they would, for the foreseeable future, be outside of the board-approved salary range for their classification. They'd be making more than other folks in their classification with similar experience or education.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Other people in Lane County. Okay, in that salary range for some of those jobs, going off the comparables and other like counties, Marion County, et cetera, that we do for all our union represented and non-represented.
Mm-hmm.
Guessing there was some tough conversations there with when you tell people they're not getting the same raise that their coworkers are.
It was actually a variety of responses. Some folks were very upset. Some folks, recognized that there had been a mistake historically that caused them to be above their range. We're expecting to never get a raise again. And so we're happy to hear that they were getting 2.5%. So there was that variety of responses.
Okay.
Chair, can I just offer one thing to that also? There may or may not be some confusion about if the board approves this, those individuals as well as the others in this plan would receive the cost of living adjustment in 2026 and in 2027. So just want to make that clear, that there was a little bit of variation among those 3 employees that Eliza talked about for the 2025 COLA because of the market comparables that drove that. But for 2026 and 2027, those individuals and everyone else in the plan would receive the same cost of living adjustment.
Yes, this puts them within the same system as everybody else, and then going forward, it would be the same as everyone else.
Okay, gotcha. No, I didn't understand that. Thank you, Mr. Mulcahy. So it's a one-time adjustment, and they'll be perfect. Thank you.
Recalibrating. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. You know, Eliza, to truly understand the impact and the significance of this work that's before us today, you have to look back in history a ways. And the longer I sit in this chair and I look around the room, the fewer people have the rearview mirror that I have. Christine, you have it, and I believe, Kristen, you were here around the same time I got here. So you know the nightmare situation that we were in 10 or so years ago with non-represented employees. We'd ignored them for years and years and years, and it was a huge lift that brought us up to a certain point. And what's happened after that lift is now you're fine-tuning it. And as Commissioner Lovell asked, is this something that will carry us into the future? Well, predictably so. You have done the work that will make it easier for future boards of commissioners and for future staff to make the adjustments necessary without having the hard conversations. And, 10 years ago, was it 10? That's about right, isn't it? I mean, things were, people hadn't had raises for years. And so the changes were, it wasn't just incremental. It was a blockbuster in some cases. And so the work, my point is, this work is significant and it's impressive. And I admire the work that you've done to get us to a point that it's going to be easier to make decisions from this point forward and easier to have conversations not for you, but for people who replace you down the road. So the people who have your job in the future, and your job in the future, Christine, and yours, Kristen. I think it's a magnificent body of work that by and large is going to serve this county for a lot of years to come. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I, of course, agree with my colleagues here and appreciate the in-depth review of the system and updating it to what is best practices for today. And I don't have any concerns going forward. I'm supportive. I just wanted to make note that for those 362 non-representative employees, I want to thank you all for all of your work. You're all dedicated public servants, and appreciate your time and attention in working for Lane County specifically. You are appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll just echo and appreciate the systems approach, right? When we correct a system, then all the things that have to operate within that system eventually, when they catch up to, because there's culture change and system change, and so it takes a while for the culture to catch up sometimes. So appreciate you taking on having some difficult conversations, I'm sure. And I'm very excited for us to be making this kind of system change for the organization that will stand the test of time, to the point of some of the comments that were made before. And on a very much lighter note, now you've got me thinking about a ferry and what happens with traffic on game day and how it maybe could be alleviated with another mode, or gondolas. I read a great article about a lot of cities putting gondolas in.
Cool.
I think the only one we have in Oregon is the OHSU one that goes over the freeway, but there's a thought. Thank you very much for the item. Without any other questions or comments or anything else from staff, we do have an order on this item before us, so I would look for a motion.
Yeah, Chair, I move to approve, I move to approve the compensation adjustments and health insurance plan changes for the non-represented classifications per Board Order 24121006 as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, staff. It's a great moment for HR.
Chair, if I may,
Yes,
just
please.
As we're closing, it looks like we have a few minutes, just echoing the deep appreciation for the work that the entire team has done, led by Eliza and others on the labor relation team, including Kristen, Carrie, and Inga, who is not able to be here today. And certainly something like this, we have a number of partners, including Christine, James, the directors, staff in the departments who were very responsive in helping us with this. So I just wanted to reflect the gratitude for everyone involved in this very major event. And thank you all as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I think someone said earlier about a good team takes a good leader, builds a good team. Thank you. So our final item before a brief recess to relocate up to the conference room is County Administration, item 9 on your agenda. Any announcements and elections update from the County Administrator this morning?
Just I'm going to do an elections update. I'll share with the board that I was yesterday able to participate, as was Commissioner Buck, made the trip to Portland to be able to participate in the Oregon Business Leaders Summit, and several hundred attendees there from a number of industry leaders from various industries. We heard from the governor. We heard from Senators Wyden and Merkley. We heard from a number of our state legislators about the process and priorities for the 25 session. So it just was a really good good opportunity to sort of hear not so much a state of the economy, but more so from a business perspective in Oregon, both the real assets and strengths that we have and successes, as well as some really significant challenges ahead. So I would encourage commissioners, if you're able to just track that in the future and able to make that session, it's really a good one. Then the elections update, I want to provide you with a brief elections update. This should be linked in your item. We recognized election staff this morning, so I gave some of this information, but I noted 213,085 ballots cast for a 75% voter turnout. Last week, the clerk's office successfully conducted the final logic and accuracy test and afterwards certified the election. So we now have a certified election. Sometimes people ask, why does it take so long to certify the election? Well, there's various reasons. You know, one is in Oregon, we have a 7-day period of time that we wait, 7 days from the election, from the date of the election, to receive any mail that has come through USPS and that is date stamped the date of the election. So we have to wait for those to come in order to count those, as well as you heard what was the number on the 2,594 letters that were sent to voters with missing or non-matching signatures. So there's that process of curing ballots that we allow for in Oregon. And so all of that is done under state law to make sure that every legal vote is counted. So again, election was certified last week. After certifying the election, 11 bipartisan teams conducted a successful hand count of 3% of the ballots returned for the races of president, state treasurer, and Measure 118. 98 temporary election workers and countless county staff supported the 7 full-time election staff that you recognized this morning to conduct the election. And now we're past the general election. We're 161 days away from the May special district election. So preparing for that, and election staff are preparing to coordinate with over 70 special districts and serve as the filing office for over 300 candidates. So there's your elections update, and happy to answer any questions, but that's all I have for you today.
Thank you. Anything for the administrator this morning from the board? Seeing none, at the sound of my gavel, we will be recessed. We have an 11 a.m. time certain up in the Board of Commissioners conference room, so everybody has a few minutes to refresh their drink and do what they need to do, and I will see you up in the conference room at 11. We are recessed. I will reconvene. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners for Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. We are currently meeting in public session in the conference room for a work session, an update on industry and demographic trends impacting the county and the intersection of childcare needs. And I will turn it over to our Community and Economic Development Manager, Jason Harris, to introduce the item and guests that he has with him.
Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you so much for having us today. As you can see, we have 4 guest speakers to speak to both a variety of trends on demographic and industry from a workforce perspective, as well as childcare. That's an intersection of both workforce needs, human service needs in our county, as well as business opportunities. With that, I will be maybe just hand over to our speakers to introduce themselves while I pull up the presentation with that. Mr. Henry Fields.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Henry Fields. I work for the Oregon Employment Department. I'm the workforce analyst for Lane and Douglas counties.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here with my professional hat on this morning as the child care sector strategist, housed at Onward Eugene, which is the economic development arm to the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for having us here this morning.
I'm Kristen Helton. I'm the program coordinator for Quality Care Connections. We're up at Lane Community College, and we support the child care workforce with training, quality improvements, funding, resource navigation, big picture there.
I'm Cheryl Henderson. I'm Director of Child and Family Education at Lane Community College, which includes Quality Care Connections, Lane County Child Care Research and Referral Agency, as well as Lane Child and Family Center Child Care.
Well, thank you all for those introductions. Just to set the table, as the Commission may recall, I gave an update regarding the Community Economic Development Program in September and recommended that we hold a series of policy work sessions on a variety of topics that really influence the county's economy and impact the economy. This is really a base-setting conversation on what are the trends affecting our county, underlying demographics, industry trends, workforce, and the intersection of local needs in regards to childcare. And so with that, I will pull up the presentation for Mr. Fields with Department of Employment to start the presentation, and then we will get into the presentation itself. Present screen. Apologies. I am not seeing the view.
View's down there. Keep going down.
There we go. I apologize for that. Full screen. Okay. With that, Mr. Fields.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully that's sharing online in the way that we intend. So I work for the Employment Department as an economist. My job is really to make sure that you all have access to the economic data you need. My job today is going to be kind of explain some very top-level stuff. There's a lot more detail. If any of you have heard me speak before, you know, there's always more detail we could go into. We'll leave plenty of time for question and answer. What I'm going to try to do is give a little bit of a sampler platter of kind of the major economic trends that we see in our area and invite kind of your questions. There's a lot of slides here that are intended for your reference later on as questions come up. But I'm going to try to be brief in introduction to the major questions that we're going to try to answer today. So let's first talk about key economic sectors. This shows basically the percentage of employment by industry in Lane County, which you also read Eugene metro area. Those are functionally the same thing in terms of looking at this from the census perspective. The major things to be aware of here are that we have a pretty diverse economy in Lane County with a lot of different base industries. You know, when I first started this job, I kind of thought of Eugene as a college town, and I've really come to complicate that a little bit because we do have several different employment bases. We're not a company town by any stretch of the imagination. This is one way to look at that. This shows those shaded bars are what employment looks like in our area. The hollow bars are ones that represent the United States. So for example, we have greater concentration of employment in healthcare, in manufacturing, and obviously public education. We have, you know, certain institutions that would make us much above our weights there, with slightly less concentration in professional services and information. One other way to look at this is through what Lane Workforce Partnership, how they approach this data, which is to look at specific sectors that, in many cases, cut across some of these industries. At where do we punch above our weight? What are the important industries for us to be supporting in a workforce setting? Lots of data contained within this table. The major highlights that I want to bring here is that really economic development traditionally is thought of as a pretty, there's no one silver bullet approach to what jobs are important in an industry or in an area. So for example, there are certain advantages and disadvantages with each of these sectors, but they represent, broadly speaking, some of the things that are important across our economy and that we are uniquely strong in the Lane County area. You can see, for example, childcare. We'll obviously have a much deeper conversation about childcare specifically, but one thing to be aware of is we have different growth rates, different average wages, and different impacts throughout the economy. Sometimes wages are not the best way to reflect what an industry's impact throughout an economy is. For example, if it's a support industry for all the other industries as well, another thing to keep in mind. One other kind of table setting measure is that most industries, well, all major industries are projected to add jobs over the long term. This is a 10-year basis that we look at job projections on. You'll notice these are arranged kind of strangely, and it's because I often, for dramatic effect, like to counteract that with what types of jobs are opening due to replacements. So those blue numbers are the amount of jobs expected to be added through growth over the next 10 years. Positive in all industries, but dwarfed by the amount of replacement openings required in each industry. That's not unique to our area. That's a pretty across-the-board thing across the United States, but it's pretty relevant to see that kind of regardless of what industry we're looking at, 9 out of 10 job openings are projected to be due to replacements in comparison to growth. Let's talk about demographic trends really quickly. One thing that I think is maybe not news to the folks in this room, but is kind of a relevant element to all of our workforce and economy, is that Lane County, and indeed Oregon overall, is an attractive place that attracts migrants from many different types of places. Here in Lane, we depend on migration for the entirety of our population growth, and that's varied throughout the years, but has generally been very positive for decades and decades. 2020 to 2022 was obviously an exception for some key reasons, but it looks like in 2023 we're going to settle into a slower but almost average level of growth going forward. That dark green part is the amount of our population that comes from net migration, people moving here minus the number who move away, and that made up in 2010 to 2020 100% of our population growth because natural increase has structurally turned into a natural decrease in our area and in many areas of Oregon as the population gets older and fewer people have children. So again, it's just an important thing to be aware of that many other areas are not facing the same sort of demographic trends. Other big demographic considerations, our area, like I mentioned, is aging, and that has an impact on the workforce. In the 1990s, 1 out of 10 jobs was held by a worker 55 and older. Now it's about 24% across Oregon. It's about the same in Lane County. You can see it varies by industry. And again, more workers are also working later in life, but because our population structure is changing, it's also changing what's happening with our workforce overall. It's an important thing for us all to be aware of. One way to look at that information is in Lane County, what percentage of the workforce is what age? So especially the 65 and older percentage of the workforce is growing very, very rapidly as that part of the population increases. The number of workers under 24 is decreasing over the long term. There's a lot of reasons for that we can get into if we want to talk more specifically about it. But there's basically a lot of things that feed into these trends that have to do with what segments of the population are growing, as well as voluntary choices that people are making or working later in life as a result of cost pressures, for example. Let's talk very briefly about the differences between rural and urban Lane County. So Lane County in general has lower average wages than Oregon, but that disparity is even more stark in rural Lane County. This is what it looks like if we, for this analysis, I'm considering Eugene, Springfield, UGB to be urban Lane County. I know that's not a perfect analogy, but it gets across the, broadly speaking, the city-based parts of Lane County versus the rural areas. Average wages are lower, and certain industries are obviously clustered in urban areas. This is what it looks like in our area, and we can get more specific data on this, but that's one reason there can be a wage disparity, for example. Those light blue ones on top are the ones with greater concentration within urban Lane County, things like management of companies, finance and insurance, professional services, whereas manufacturing, construction, transportation, warehousing, and then obviously particularly natural resources are concentrated in more rural areas, versus about 19% of overall jobs. Let's talk about housing affordability, obviously a gigantic question with a lot of different elements to consider. To give you the workforce perspective on it, perhaps you all have seen some version of this data. I think it's an important source to be aware of and kind of keep track of over time. This shows how many building units are permitted in Lane County year by year. The broad trends are obviously the 2010s represented a very low point because of the housing-based recession. And while we've seen some increase in recent years, it doesn't match the levels of the 90s and 2000s, particularly by type of housing. You can see also as well, it's broken out by size of structure. Those orange ones, which are 5+ units in a structure, obviously tend to be spikier as, you know, a new apartment building is permitted, that sort of thing, in one year and not another. Like I mentioned, there is an income gap with the United States. That number has gone down over time, but still remains a consistent issue. It's one of the issues that I talk the most about because there's a lot of different things that feed into it, and it obviously exacerbates things like housing and childcare affordability issues. But for example, over the last 10 years, we've seen that number, that gap with the U.S. decrease to 87% of U.S. per capita income, but still not where we would like to be, as well as below where Oregon is as a state. One other element to be aware of, this very quickly just shows in Lane, Oregon, the U.S., where income comes from. In Lane, we get more of our income from personal current transfer receipts, which is a fancy way of saying government transfers, things like Social Security, that type of thing. 25% here in Lane versus 18% in the United States. So if there's cost of living changes that aren't reflected in that, that has a bigger impact in our area as well. So kind of smash those things together, the fact that housing costs, that housing supply maybe has not necessarily matched up with population growth in recent years, and there's affordability issues kind of across income spectrums. Housing costs have risen, and particularly that's true on the affordable end. The dotted line there is the bottom third of housing value in Lane County and U.S. respectively, and you can see the bottom third of Lane's housing affordability is about where the U.S. median is. So again, additional squeezes put on lower income, lower earning parts of the population. How difficult is it for businesses to find workers? This is a really important element for us to be aware of going forward. Broadly speaking, there are more job vacancies open than there were pre-COVID. You can kind of see this is from a survey that we give to businesses across Oregon. Similar data is available for Lane County as well as how many are difficult to fill. We now have more job openings than we did, for example, in a year before 2020, although not quite at that fever pitch that we did in 2021 and 2022. So we're still dealing with a tight labor market, but not the extraordinary levels that we're seeing in the last few years. One other way to look at that, what's the number of unemployed people per private job vacancy, which is included in this data here. Oregon, a little bit higher than the US, but still we're talking about levels of 1 to 1.5 unemployed people per job vacancy. In the US, it's still at or right below 1.0, meaning there's more unemployed people, there's more job vacancies than there are unemployed people to fill them. That's a very tight labor market that makes it difficult to find the businesses that we need. There will be more information about this if we want to talk about other specific demographics, but just to tee it off for the folks talking about childcare, I wanted to share one example. I've done a lot of analysis looking at who could be in our labor force, who is not in our labor force, which is obviously distinct from who is unemployed, who is not participating in the labor force at all. One interesting element would be, for example, women with young children. This is, again, not unique to Lane County, but just to provide some perspective here. This shows in Lane County what percentage of females 20 to 64 participated in the labor force. It's 75%. If we assume that they participate at the same rate as men, a slightly lower rate of 82%, if they were to boost that, there would be 8,000 more workers in our workforce. So pretty substantial for our area. And that's particularly stark if we just look at the subsets of the population with children under 6, and 6 to 17, or with children under 6, we're talking about more than 1,000 people, because, for example, women with children in those age ranges participate in the workforce at 64%. There's obviously there's decreased ability to participate in the labor force if you are providing your own childcare, for example. And I think it's pretty easy to see in a lot of these kind of counterfactual scenarios how we might draw more folks into the labor force, which is a big issue right now, given that the job vacancies are high. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it there. There's more information on recent publications I've given, and here's my contact information. Obviously, there'll be more Q&A, but that's kind of representing a little bit of what the broad spectrum of issues we want to look at is, and I'll hand it off to Holly to take more specific dive into childcare.
Excellent, thank you, Henry. And just for the board's awareness, in the full PowerPoint packet, after the childcare presentation, there's another 20 or so slides of additional labor force data that Henry provided, so just for reference. Thank you.
Great. That's a perfect segue, I think, to our presentation. I think just a note that we've also put a lot of content in here that we won't necessarily address today, but happy to follow up with additional information and details. And I think what Henry just shared shines a light on how increasingly we're thinking, I think, across the state, across the nation, of childcare as critical infrastructure to support the economy and to support families, working families across the board. So we're going to give you a very brief, condensed overview of childcare, as well as talk about some of the challenges that exist in our community and the opportunities and local data as well. Again, happy to answer questions and provide additional detail after the presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Kristen. We're going to do a lot of passing of the keyboard, I think, to talk a little bit more about our statewide and local structure.
Down arrow. Okay. Terrific. Thank you for having us here today. The childcare structure in Oregon is fairly large, and it is managed by the Department of Early Learning and Care that oversees the Childcare Licensing Division, our agency, which is Quality Care Connections Childcare Resource and Referral, the Early Learning Hubs, which is all the key stakeholders with childcare that come together under United Way, which is our Early Learning Hub, and then the employment-related daycare, which provides subsidy for families that are low income that wouldn't be able to otherwise afford childcare. We also have some state and regional partners. Find Childcare Oregon is a referral database. We have the Oregon Center for Career Development at Portland State, which sets the professional development requirements and services for childcare providers. The Research Institute at Western Oregon University and the Early Learning System Initiative at Oregon State University are also the partners involved in our childcare system. Many folks don't really understand the different types of childcare in Oregon. There are both licensed childcare programs and unlicensed or exempt childcare programs. The licensed childcare programs are both center-based, so you can picture your classic childcare center is a licensed entity. And then we have certified and registered family childcare. This is childcare out of someone's home, and certified is just more children, but also more requirements and rules. We also have preschool and school-age recorded programs. Those are unlicensed. They have very strict regulations on how they can stay unlicensed. And then we also have license-exempt childcare. That can be childcare out of someone's home for 3 or fewer children, or it can be Parks and Recreation, City of Eugene, the school districts providing care as well. So those are all the different types of childcare. What do we know about childcare right now? I'm sure you're familiar with the childcare desert, and that means that in a particular area, there is only enough space for 33% of the children in care. So this slide focuses on Oregon, but I'd like to talk a little bit about Linn County. So Linn County is considered a childcare desert. We're right on the cusp for preschool, although the data that we have is from 2022. We're in the midst of our market price and supply survey, and we'll have that data in the next 6 months. So for preschool, we're at a 33% rate. So there's only one slot for every 3 children, ages 3 to 5. And for infants and toddlers, we are at a 17% rate. So that is a critical issue. If you have an infant or toddler at home, you've probably been familiar with how hard it is to find childcare. So that's all I'm going to talk about for that slide. And you want me to pray for you?
I just first have to say that in our world, in my world, I believe that childcare is the most important work that we can do for our citizens, because these are our future citizens. So when we talk about providing care, it's also about providing childcare. It's about the care, right? So some people choose to pay someone else to provide care to their children, and some people choose to figure it out, which could mean they're still working, but they're juggling schedules, which is challenging for everyone involved. So the compensation crisis, as you already showed, the average wage in the childcare sector here in Lane County is just over $30,000 a year. Some providers or teachers have access to benefits, but it's pretty inconsistent. Access to health, vision, and dental insurance, paid time off even, and retirement savings plans that are really hard to come by if you're a childcare worker. And so you could view it as childcare workers are, and owners of childcare, essentially subsidizing the care for families through their low wages. And even childcare workers struggle to afford care for their own children. So currently, the annual cost of quality childcare in Lane County is over $18,000 a year, and the slide is actually University of Oregon tuition for 1 year is just over $16,000. So I always use these numbers, right? Because if you have a young child, you're at the lowest paying in your career, and you are paying more than it will cost to send your child to the University of Oregon when they are 18. So that usually gets people. You can if you have a family of 4 and 2 wage earners, and they're making over $260,000 a year, you can afford childcare, no problem. But a lot of people, especially in Lane County, don't. This doesn't reflect the wages. If you family makes $62,000 or less a year, you would qualify for ERDC, Employee-Related Daycare, through the state of Oregon, and there are choices, many choices out there for those families. Go again. There currently is a wait list for employment-related daycare, even though not everybody who is allotted those funds is using those funds for childcare. We're trying to figure out why that is. I think some of it is that people have the impression or think they heard that there aren't ERDC spots around town or around Lane County, but there are. And that's a challenge because we don't all work for the same agency to get the same information. To me, that's a challenge. Facility space, zoning, and permitting are a challenge for childcare. Paying rent is a problem kind of enough, and not having space, and we've had zoning and permitting issues in Lane County. And again, we need to better understand the existing data to determine why still some childcare programs have open spots in our community. So the workforce crisis is just as big as in many industries. Compensation is for sure an issue, but I actually bump up the lowest bullet, the intrinsic difficulty of the job. Caring for and teaching groups of young children is hard work. One of the reasons I really like my job is I get to see both sides. So I oversee and supervise people who directly work with children 8 hours a day, as well as supporting the community childcare providers. It's really hard work, and I guess we're not going into this, but an average ratio of 3 to 5-year-olds and their care providers is about 2 teachers for every 18 children. And, right, these are 3 to 5-year-olds who need help to do most things throughout their day. You can receive an associate's degree at LCC right now in ECE, but there's a cost to that, and you need experience also to be a teacher. All the rules that are in place are important. They're just challenges to get through. Hiring and workforce attendance issues impact the business's income and sustainability. Before COVID, childcare providers didn't close. They stayed open. It felt to me anyway, like we're just going to stay open no matter what. Fortunately, in a way, COVID gave providers the opportunity to go, I just don't have enough staff. I'm going to close tomorrow. And we're hearing this in all places. Sometimes at Lane, we're having to close early because 2 people called in sick and only 1 substitute is available, right? Those are the kind of day-to-day workings of that happen in childcare. Okay.
We wanted to share some specific data specific to Lane County. We've touched on some of these pieces, I think, already. The childcare desert issues, the availability of childcare for preschool-age children, and the crisis that we're seeing for infants and toddlers. When we look at the numbers of children that we have, the number of childcare slots, and those numbers shift on a monthly, weekly basis, we know we need to add somewhere in the ballpark of 1,500 childcare slots to meet the need, or to begin to meet the need in Lane County. But that's just the first step. Those slots have to be, as we talked about, adequately staffed with qualified, well-compensated individuals. Those childcare slots have to have facility space to exist in, and then they have to be affordable for families. So there's lots of different moving pieces to try to address the challenges and alleviate the issues that families are facing. I think we can probably go to the next slide. So it's not all bad news. There are some promising strategies emerging in our community, across the state, across the nation, particularly coming out of COVID, where I think there's been a lot of renewed energy looking at the ways the system's broken and the innovations and things we can do to address the crisis. I'm not going to read through the entire list. We have slides for each of these strategies that are emerging here in our own community.
So our essential services align with the expectations that Department of Early Learning and Care has for childcare in Oregon. And one of the biggest things that we are tasked with is to support recruitment and retention. We need more people in the workforce, and we need more childcare programs. And we need those programs to stay open. And we have lost 2 large centers in the past year with, I'm guesstimating, about 150 slots just gone. And so recruitment and retention is really, really important. So what is Quality Care Connections doing about that? We do a lot of community outreach, talking with families and the workforce. We support education and training and provide scholarships, but we are nowhere meeting the need for the education and training support. We support career pathways, trying to encourage people to get their ECE degree. We provide focused childcare networks and cohorts, which are groups of providers that come together to develop skills in a particular content area. Lots of professional development opportunities. We are going out to childcare centers and family childcare every day to provide coaching and consultation on what quality care looks like, on business practices, on curriculum, on safety, health and nutrition, inclusion. Social emotional development is huge right now. We have 3 staff dedicated to supporting childcare providers with social emotional practices. And then, as I said, the business development and practices support. We're busy. We have a small office of about 14 folks, and we've doubled in the past 4 years.
just briefly touch on, you probably have all been tracking the progress of Ollie Court, which is affordable housing and childcare on the ground floor of that development. There's another project that's being planned for Florence, which is pairing affordable housing with an adjacent brand new early learning center that will essentially double the number of licensed childcare slots in their community. And it will add to their supply of infant toddler care. Currently, the Florence community has 2 infant toddler childcare slots to serve the entire community. And so this will be the first classroom dedicated to infant toddler care in Florence specifically. Compensation and benefits, we know this is a root cause, as we've shared. The average wage for folks in the childcare industry is just over $30,000 per year, which is just over about half of, I think, the annual wage when you look across all industries. And so we know that compensation as well as benefits are a root cause to bringing people into the field. So we're looking at developing a shared wage scale so that we can, across our community, across the state, have agreement on what different positions, how they're classified and how they're compensated, as well as looking at how we can make sure that all people in the childcare field have access to benefits across the board.
Okay, the early child care business accelerator is just like other business accelerator programs you've probably heard of. That's a cohort model. It was started in Central Oregon, and we've replicated it here in Layton County. So Quality Care Connections works with the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, LCC, and are supported by Onward Eugene to make this happen. So we started in winter 2023, and we had a cohort there. Then we had one in the spring, and currently we're running 2 cohorts. One is in Spanish, and one is rural, and they meet every other time or sometimes in both places. In Florence and Cottage Grove, there's a total of 5 participants from those areas. And we have 9 women in the Spanish language cohort. And this has turned out to be really a great way to start small childcare. And everybody is, they're all women, and they come and they say, I've always wanted to do this, but I didn't know how, right? Because they needed a business plan. And when we first met with the Small Business Development Center, they said, why would we do this? You can't make money in childcare. But now they've come around, and because it's their whole binder system in it, and it supports it with budget. This is what you need to charge. This is how you run a childcare business. So we're very excited about that program.
And then we're in the process of developing an early childhood education registered apprenticeship opportunity, which, as Kristen and Cheryl touched on, is just yet another pathway into the field, and for us is an exciting way to offer a paid pathway into the field of early learning and care. And then coming in 2025, we will be launching Best Place for Working Parents, which is sort of an acknowledgement system for companies, employers who are providing family-friendly practices and benefits to go through the process to earn essentially this badge that they can use on their recruitment tools, in their sort of marketing, public relations, to show that they're a company that is taking steps to support their employees who have children. So that will be launching in Lane County and across the state in January.
And lastly, we wanted to share some brainstorming strategies, the way that our Lane County commissioners might be able to support childcare in Lane County. We would love support with getting regular updates and information out to the community and sharing information with you all about the state of childcare in Lane County. We are also always curious about tax incentives for childcare centers and in-home programs. We're looking to include childcare in more grant opportunities. We see a huge amount of barrier to programs that are wanting to open family childcare or center-based childcare regarding the permitting and zoning requirements, as well as being able to afford the fees for those issues. We really want to see the business community step up. They are the employers that employ parents. And so helping to garner support from the business community so that they know the importance of childcare to their workers. And recognition for childcare workers. We know it's underpaid, we know they're underappreciated, and they work really, really hard. And then advocacy at the state level. We would love to see ERDC be all childcare workers automatically qualify for ERDC. Some other states are doing this so that they can enroll their children in the program at which they're working, and then the center or the childcare program doesn't then lose that income if they want to provide that benefit. And then we know that we need to get more qualified professionals in the childcare field. And so we're looking for supports around free tuition for early childhood education degrees that it would be essential to developing a highly qualified workforce. So these are our asks today.
Stickers.
We would like to thank you all for being here and listening to our plea for the support of childcare. I'd love to get a hand of how many folks have children and have faced a childcare issue in the past, right? So we all feel it. We all are aware of this and know the impacts on our community, on our economic state, and on our children.
Well, thank you all for your excellent presentations and your attendance today. The matters before the chair and commissioners. I'm available to stop the slides and unless anyone wanted me to pull back into any other slides.
I will definitely want to refer again to them later. The one previous to this, can you just go back there really quick, the ways commissioners can support there, just to make sure everybody took that in, because that's really what we're really here to do. This is a work session. We're not making any decisions today. But as I was looking at that, I was sort of clustering some of them. To me, there's some natural pairings of some of those. I just want to make sure everybody really kind of took that in for a minute, and then we can probably take it down and just have a conversation. I'll just open it up to the board for conversation.
You better be quick.
Question.
I got it. Can I see that slide again?
We have these slides.
Yes,
Yeah.
maybe I'll leave it there.
I'm putting
and then
that slide here.
it's a live feed of us all.
Commissioner Buck, yeah.
Yeah, so the sheer poverty wage of employees in this industry is obviously a massive hurdle to attracting, business owners. So knowing that you got a little pushback of, okay, why should we invest in this, given the fact that we don't see how this is going to be economically viable for people, how do you overcome that? Is the answer that anything above 30,000 has to be publicly funded in order for people to have a living wage in this industry to keep costs low for parents? Or, is there a spread of alternative things that we can support or do? Because I think without really addressing that elephant in the room, it's going to continue to be just a massive struggle to develop this industry.
So, facility rent and property tax. If childcare didn't have to pay those, like at LCC, I don't pay the college rent. The employees there make probably some of the highest probably the highest in the county, right? So if there's ways to decrease their other costs, which is really rent and utilities, they could pay their people more. That's one solution. The state, like last year, the state put out an application, and if you worked in childcare, there's about 4 things, you would receive a check for $500. And then they say they're going to do it again, and then it takes like a whole nother year to get that out. We have received some money from CCOs to support childcare providers who are working with children with challenging behaviors or have social emotional needs, and we are offering a cash stipend to get support from us, because it's just like some subtle way to keep, so, you know, people, it's hard to ask for help sometimes, and we're trying this out. Like, is this a way, this is a way to get support to people who need it and to compensate them for their time working with somebody who's trying to help them, because they are probably with kids 8 or 9 hours a day, and they're right, and then they are doing what other people do in the evening and weekends. So those are a couple of the things we've thought about. I mean, I've thought about, right, if you own a home and you're providing childcare in it, does the county need your property tax, right? Because you're providing a public service in a sense. So those are some of the strategies that I talk about. But, you know, to pay for an ECE degree where you're then going to be making maximum $30,000, like, why would you do that? And we need that.
And I think to add on to that, it's the data is so complex that $30,000, maybe Henry, you could speak to who that includes and what we can see, because it's not necessarily the business owners running a business, and that's a whole other area to look at. What's the profitability, and where I think the SBDC has been helping the accelerator participants to figure that piece out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you get right at the issue there. First of all, we all know that profit margins are low in that type of environment, so there's not a lot of room for wiggle room. One thing I will say though, so that number represents an average across all types of workers. Some workers will earn less than that, which makes it even more difficult, while there is also, depending on the angle that we want to take on that question, for example, different career pathways such as education administrators that earn more than that amount of money. So it really is a matter of, I think a lot of the strategies that you all talked about that kind of talk about a multi-pronged approach of using non-monetary strategies, ways to support these workers, is another key element of making sure wages are competitive, and also helping us understand what the full spectrum of opportunities in there would be, so that there are different opportunities that workers could take advantage of in different parts of their career. But I would say, in general, your question is very perceptive, and it relates to something that happens in several different industries. Another key example would be something like nursing care facilities. There are caps on what businesses can reasonably pay in terms of wages. It's very difficult work, and for similar levels of skill, you can earn more money doing other things. So it is definitely honestly a societal level thing we all have to get our arms around, but this is one instantiation of that. I think it's the right question to be asking. There are definitely, it's a multi-pronged approach, and it does, but that particular number does include a variety of different types of workers, which is another kind of element in our response to that crisis, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple questions if you don't mind. I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to talk as fast as Henry, because I appreciate your way you put that out, Henry. You said the zoning and permitting requirements is a definite barrier, and this also plays into the whole affordability discussion we're going to have later. Waiving or lowering fees is a step. Obviously, that's going to take a big bite out of the apple for wages. But you said we needed to add 500 to 2,500 new childhood slots. Do you have any handle on about how many facilities that is? I mean, home facilities?
Yeah, I know. I mean, homes are about 10.
That's what I thought you'd say, 10. So we're talking about, 200 homes, or give or take. So let's go to Holly's point about, tax incentives and properties. The county only gets 12 cents on the dollar, so having the county's taxes cut out is not going to help us or you very much. But I'm curious, if the child care folks are providing educational opportunities, why couldn't that tax incentive be taken out of the school's cut of the taxation of the house? Especially if those folks are of the age where their children are no longer in school, and these are empty nester parents who are now doing something to supplement their retirement, whatever, having a child care center. I think that would be an interesting thing. Secondly, and I know these are statements rather than questions, and I'm sure you're going to have some comments on it. In some of the things, Holly, you said about the adult care centers, my understanding of the adult care centers is, having a young man who's gotten into that business, is those wages that they make are tax exempt. So my question is if a person who is running a child education or a child daycare center, why aren't those wages in the state tax exempt, so that basically the take-home pay becomes a little bit more, which would offset the wage differential? You follow my thinking here? Okay, those are my other comments, so.
Thank you. Home care, you're saying home care for adults who need home care, those wages are taxed.
I've got a young man who was a good friend of my late son from Ethiopia, who started in the adult healthcare business. He has since bought 3 homes. He runs 3 facilities out of there. He makes about $40,000 a month. That's tax deferred and tax exempt, because just the basis of how that business runs. Obviously, it's a needed core, so why don't we approach as a county, we're always leading things in Lane County and the state, why don't we say, hey, we're gonna propose a policy that all child workers are tax exempt payroll. Let's offset that right away. That would make the biggest gain right away.
Yes, it would.
And leverage that against the care industry.
Commissioners, comments before I
just want to throw out another ask, if that's okay. Springfield recently did away with ruling that the childcare provider must live in their home that they're doing the childcare. So now a program can operate a childcare in another facility and not within their home, or they can operate more than one since they can't live in 2 places. And childcare licensing, it doesn't matter to them. And so kind of loosening up on those zoning, permitting legislation, not to make a program unsafe, of course, but to make it more viable and doable.
Yeah, and that was some of what I was going to raise, and Commissioner Buck and Holly and I have been around and around with a couple of specific sites, right, where there's that line between, yes, it's about safety, of course you want the sprinklers and the accessibility features, but when you start creating barriers to actually providing the care, and that I think was part of another instance was an issue where it's in-home care, it's licensed as in-home care, but it's not where the provider lives, and so they couldn't take advantage of that. Yeah, and that's where I was looking at this. Some of these things are state, it's the county that enforces, but it's the state policy that needs to be addressed. So I'm looking at our policy director over there for, long-term thinking about opportunities for working with our delegation or other members in Salem to identify some of those things that would then improve the conditions for other counties too. And, overall, the issue here, we're talking about low wages, these are long-standing historic cultural biases really against the nature of this work and this workforce, right? Historically, this has actually been free labor caregiving, almost exclusively provided by women and majority women of color historically in this country. So we've got a long legacy that we're trying to overcome and catch up on when it comes to honoring it as a professional line of work, that it's not babysitting, it's child development work, and that the wages and the working conditions that go with it deserve and are worthy of a certain amount of respect and compensation. So there's a lot that's bigger than what we can address at this table, but I think just acknowledging that and rooting the conversation in that history is really an important part of helping to overcome it. I will say to that recognition for childcare workers, in 2014 or 15 it was, Eugene and Springfield together the 2 mayors at the time did it was like a caregiver appreciation day or something, and there was joint proclamation and there was media there, and those things are only as useful as you're ready to leverage the exposure. So something I would certainly be happy in the new year if this board was interested to revisit something at the county level along those lines, working with Holly and other folks about, because we can say nice things at one meeting and then it goes away, or we can really be thoughtful about timing it and how we use it to help with some of these other possibilities.
Well, thanks for your perspective, Chair. You have a deep history in looking into childcare and really providing information regarding what we can do better. Not just we, but we as a society can do better, and we have to do better. There's no question about it. And as we look around at the causes of childcare woes, I'm just going to use that term, which is horribly inadequate. But the childcare issues that we have, so many things go into it. We're looking at the pay for the workers. Not much incentive to become a childcare worker, clearly. And we're looking at as an extrapolation of that, childcare centers, the smaller ones as well as the larger ones. There's not much incentive to do that either. Because of first off, how do you attract staff, and how do you pay them? All of these things that the chair so eloquently elaborated on. But so as a county, you ask us very specifically, what can we do, or what are we willing to do as county commissioners? Well, everything and anything is my response. However, we can't do everything and anything, so where can we very specifically be of assistance? And I'm excited and interested to hear suggestions. But as we look around, one thing that we discovered that if you work in nonprofits, particularly nonprofits that provide essential services to people, like Food for Lane County, for instance, you know that people make choices based upon what they have to pay for versus what they can pay for. And food, we know, is one of the last things that people pay for. They pay for the other things they got to pay for, childcare being one of those things. So how can we alleviate in other ways to allow more families' resources to be used on the essentials of childcare? Not everybody has grandparents around who can be the childcare or who can subsidize wages to provide childcare. Very few people do. So consequently, what can we do? I have a neighbor who lives a few houses away from me who has a child in preschool, pays $1,400 a month because both parents work. One's in school and one works. And they pay $1,800 a month in rent. So where can we be of assistance in some of the other ticks and some of the other areas that we can be of assistance to help provide more money for people's actual use of paying for childcare. So I'm kind of chewing on that a little bit. The other thing I'm going to point out is that Mr. Fields, you gave us a slide, and the head of the slide was that the Lane County depends on migration for a population increase. What if we didn't have migration? There'd be less pressure on childcare. That's not going to happen, is it? And additionally, we also have about at least 2,000 new adults in Eugene alone every year that graduate from high school. That's 2,000, in addition to the, 1,300 or so annually in migration. So all of this produces more pressure on the things that put families in pressure. So we as commissioners can address other areas. We can address housing. In the ways that we can. We can address the affordability of other essential services that take away from a family's ability to pay for childcare, while at the same time doing every single thing that we possibly can. And I rack my brain as I can. Your brains are far more powerful than mine in suggesting how we can help. But I think you look around this room and you have willing participants, people who no one of us has not felt the crunch from this, or had shed tears over the children who don't have childcare. When our oldest son was born, we both worked, and we paid $10 a day to Betty Wright to take care of Daddy Farr. Boy, those days are way behind us, aren't they? And so those people who are in a generation that don't understand what this generation is going through on childcare really need to have the bell rung in no uncertain way, so that when it comes time for us to make sacrifices in other areas to make certain we can help child care meet the needs, then people will be aware of why we're making the sacrifice and the pain that people suffer and feel from it. And once again, I'm far less eloquent than Chair Trieger and far less knowledgeable than you and the industry. But ring my bell, keep it ringing hard.
I do have a thought. Thank you, Commissioner, for that. I love the Business Accelerator, because I know when I was doing more work in the space, a lot of it is people who want to provide care. They're focused on providing care, not running a business. And it creates a weird tension to be like the bill collector for the family that you're providing care for. So I love that you're working with the SPDC on helping with that support. The apprenticeship program really is of interest to me too. And I wondered to what extent, if any, there's opportunities to partner with some of the counties programs just to learn more about who might want to go on this career path or what the challenges they might face in finding care through, you know, our nurse home visiting program and our nurse family partnership or a WIC program. Those just seem like logical places where there could be opportunity to sort of recruit folks into either or both of those tracks. Is that a relationship you have with county?
I hadn't thought about it in quite that way, Commissioner, but I think it's a great connection that we'd be happy to help facilitate or, yeah, follow up on.
We work with the high school CTE programs, for sure.
Great. Well, it is, and it's great that Henry was here as part of this because as people will hopefully someday get tired of hearing me say this because we'll all be saying it, childcare is the work that makes all other work possible. And I know for many, many people, myself included, it delayed entering the workforce. It made the entry to the workforce be part-time or lower wage work without benefits, without retirement savings to balance being available to do care. And eventually, it's not what today is about, but I mean, elder care is sort of the other end of the spectrum. I mean, caregiving, care professions are, again, traditionally and historically not valued the way they should be, and it's coming around to bite us. So.
We always do a plug for space too. So what people don't realize that some infants and toddlers, like this room could care for, half of this room could care for 8 infants and toddlers, which is sad to say, right? So if the county has any spaces available to, you know, that's how it gets done too.
Well, and we do increasingly see that as a very durable strategy where we have several employers that come to us that want to discuss on-site childcare for their employees, but we know from history, if you look at Nike's incredible facility, those needs fluctuate, and then they're also at the whim of changes in leadership, budgets as to whether or not those centers stay open. And so the more that municipalities or others are able to step in and provide the space or the facility that employers could potentially buy into to secure access for their employees or offset capital costs, operation costs, that we see that as a really durable, promising strategy for moving forward.
I can feel us all, that pinged a whole bunch of ideas that Commissioner Buck.
Because there's also infrastructure fund grants out there from the state for childcare.
I was on the same wavelength specifically because, you know, Commissioner Farr and I are on the Homes for Good board, and all equal courses being developed, and that space of pairing affordable housing and childcare is got such huge potential, but it doesn't have to be just affordable housing where this occurs, right? Because you have so much public housing out there in market rate where if there were some incentives for even those market rate developers to provide space for this industry specifically, or other buildings, governmental buildings, that can open space for care providers specifically. I think this is just a huge untapped location because the cost, the overhead that you were saying of the building and the utility coverage is such a huge portion of the expense for a small business to take under. And often they're in older homes that are not set up the way that you need for childcare, or their utilities are sky high because they don't have great building insulation or whatever it is. And so I'm gonna just think about that more, and it may require some state level advocacy for incentives for pairing the two together. But unless you can cover the costs of construction and just overhead, I'm not sure how you're gonna reach compensation level required to make this work.
There is a county in Nevada, I think it might be the Reno area, that is funding the development of single-family homes. And the folks that get to move into these homes have to agree to operate a family childcare for up to 2 years. And then they pay
rent, but it's a rent to own. And so they end up owning the home in which they are able to provide childcare. And that was a complete out-of-the-box idea that I thought, wow, we hadn't even heard of that before. And it's already happening somewhere else.
Fantastic. Commissioner
I'll be very brief. You know, that is brilliant thoughts, you know, ideas such as that. And a slide that you give to us, Henry, is the one, the percentage of workforce by age. I think that exacerbates things. Those over 65 years old, it's gone up to close to 9% are working now. A lot of those folks used to take care of their family children, and they're not doing it. So how can could we be innovative, and instead of them going to work at Jerry's or wherever they go to work, you know, part-time, to provide some of the skills that they have in childcare for maybe their family, maybe others. You know, just innovative ideas like it's probably not Douglas County, it's probably, it might be,
Washoe probably is
But, you know, ideas like that are brilliant because, you know, it does, incrementally, we can make adjustments. I don't think there's any big home run that we can hit, but lots and lots of infield base hits is what we're after.
Even publicizing in that slide about the different types of childcare, I think Cheryl and I were thinking the same thing, that license exempt, I'm gonna probably not get this exactly right, but family friend and neighbor care providers can get reimbursed from the state through the employment-related daycare program. So I don't know, Cheryl.
And you
if
can
wanna say
have,
more.
you can serve up to 3 children. Then that's not nothing, right? So you're home anyway and you,
And if I didn't know that, I wonder how many people don't know that.
right. Yeah, so that could be our next.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Jason, for bringing this panel to us, and look forward to seeing what we can do in the new year to move this industry forward and help you all out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
That concludes our morning's business. So at the sound of my gavel, we'll be recessed for luncheon back in Harris Hall at 1:30.